Hey, hi everyone. Good evening. Welcome to the demo session of VAPT 2. So, people who have attended the yesterday's demo session, I think you would have you know got to know that we have covered the topics like introduction to the VAPT, okay, vulnerability assessment and penetration testing, why it is important to learn, and what kind of a work we do it for the organizations in terms of helping them to secure all their you know infrastructure or products or assets, right? And what kind of skills are required. And I think question and answers, that's what we have covered yesterday. Correct. So today I've planned few demos for you, right? So I'll just show you few demos, uh, which will be again covered as a part of the sessions. This is just to make you comfortable. Like some of may have the perception, right? Okay, are we only going to learn through the theory or practicals? How it will be, right? So, like what I will do is basically I'll explain first, every topic theoretically, and then I'll show you the practicals in our own virtual lab. Then I want you guys to also replicate those practicals and perform the other advanced labs, and then you can directly go and apply the same concepts in the real time when you guys are working on any sort of a assessment, right? So as a part of that, uh, today I'll cover few network and also application layer attacks. Okay. um, First, let me cover uh, few attacks from the web application point of view, right? I think why I'm directly getting into the web application related attacks is, see, attacks happens through the network and also through the application as well. But nowadays, all the network layer attacks have been taken care, or I can say it's become very tough, okay, to perform the network layer attacks because of having all the network security devices in the place, like network monitoring, firewalls, routers, okay, IDS, IPS, etc. Right? Even I can show you that how do we perform the network related assessment. But yeah, first let me show you the application related attacks, few of the application related attacks. So okay, I mean, there is a more security on the network layer. So what attackers are doing now? Attackers are now finding the vulnerabilities in the application, okay, which is web application, which is running on a server. Okay, so through that vulnerability, they are actually compromising the entire server, and they're moving into the backend database, or they are taking the connection back, even if there is a firewall enabled and all, right? I mean, what I'm trying to say is we have the strong network security. Let's assume that we have a web server. They are closing all the ports, opening only the required ports like HTTP and HTTPS. So you will be only able to access those two ports, correct? So what attackers are doing now, they are finding the vulnerabilities on those two ports, okay, wherever the application is running. So by compromising or finding application related vulnerabilities, they are compromising the server, right? So today, as a part of the demo, I am using a website called as a demo.testfy.net. This is, I can say, kind of a online demo web application, right? So here I'm not the user. Okay, this is like a kind of a banking application. I'm not the user of this particular bank. Let's say I'm an attacker. Okay, I'm an attacker. I'm visiting this banking application. I found that there is a login page. So let's assume that even uh, while you know while they are, I mean, developers are developing an application, they didn't even follow the security best practices. they might missed some of the security implementations, right? So as an attacker, when he's testing or performing the attack, if in case if he find any sort of a critical vulnerabilities, definitely he's going to exploit it, right? The very first thing he will try, on the authentication part, right? When I say authentication, this is like it's asking username and password, right? So suppose let's say if I'm giving the username as a Harsha and password also, let's say Harsha, login. What it says that login failed. We are sorry, but this username or password was not found in our system. Please try again. Which means that we are not the user, or we haven't registered, or we don't have the account in this particular banking application, right? Right. So let's assume that you know there is a SQL injection vulnerability. Okay, I think you might be new to it. So SQL injection vulnerability is basically I mean, when you give the username and password over here, those username and password will be going to the backend database, which is like in this case it's SQL. It will check whether that user and password name is matching. If it is matching, it will allow you to log in into the application, or else you will be seeing this error message, right? This is what happened when you give your username and your password, correct? So as an attacker, okay, when he while he is testing it or while he is attacking it, if he identifies such type of a login page, and you know and if there is no security, okay, if there is no security for this login page, he'll be able to bypass this login page, and he'll be able to log in with the same credentials, like Harsha, which I have given last time. Okay, do you want to see that how we'll be able to bypass this login page with the same credentials? Anyone knows it how to do it? Anyone maybe studied about the SQL injection previously? See, the same username Harsha, I'm just adding something called as a single quote, hyphen space, and I'm just giving random password. I'm not even looking at what password I'm giving it over here, right? So if I click on login now, okay, nothing happened. No worries. So Harsha, single quote, R1 equal to 1 hyphen space. Okay. So Harsha, there is no username of Harsha. So this time I am giving single quote R1 equal to 1 hyphen. This is the SQL injection payload. I'll explain this. Login. You can see I was able to log in directly as a administrator into this web application without having valid credentials of an admin, right? I can able to access all the previous transactions over here. I can also able to initiate some of the transactions from the one account to other account, right? So what happened over here? So what happened is, while the developer is developing this application, okay, he didn't actually included the security to prevent such type of a SQL injection attacks, because developers will always be thinking that, okay, people will only put their username and password to log in into it, right? Okay, that's fine. When the user is putting username and password, which is expected input, okay, that should check whether this user is present or not. But like an attacker who thinks, okay, out of the box, and who wants to bypass um, such kind of an authentication mechanism by giving a simple payloads like this, right? And they'll be able to log in into the administrator account, because most of the databases will have the admin account itself as a first user. So here what happened is, it is checking whether this user Harsha is existed in the database or not. Okay, if this user is not present, okay, we are saying R, check 1 equal to 1. So 1 equal to 1 is actually a true, okay, true statement. So of course, when you generate a true statement, it allows you to log in into the application. Okay, so we were able to log in as a administrator, right? So this is one example, which is authentication bypass by exploiting the SQL injection vulnerability. Okay, um, now this is one example, guys. Similarly, there are a lot of vulnerabilities, which can be identified, in the application, right? I'll show you another attack. Okay, I'll show you another attack. So this attack is basically again as a part of the application layer attack only. So this attack, we call it as a session fixation attack. Okay, the attack which I'm going to show you is called as a session fixation. Okay, so what is the session fixation attack is? Okay, so uh, attacker will only fix, okay, attacker will only give the session ID to the victim. Okay, so like I'll explain this first, in a theoretical way, then I'll show you this practical demo to you, right? So let's say you are a user. Okay, you are a user sitting with your laptop, right? So now attacker, let's say, got to know that a website called as a, let's say, the banking application, the one which we have seen, right? So and so bank application has what? Session fixation. Okay, session fixation vulnerability. This is related to the session, guys. Once you uh, log in into any application, the server is going to generate a session for you. With that session only, you will be able to access all the resources without giving authentication again and again. That's the reason whenever the session get expires, it'll ask you to put the authentication. Usually, it happens when you, um, you know, when you don't interact with the application. Let's say you log into the banking application, you don't interact it for, let's say, 5 minutes or 10 minutes, the session will get expires. Correct. So once you perform the authentication, the server is going to give a session ID, right? So you know here in the session fixation attack, what happens is, before the authentication itself, the server is going to give a session ID. So we are going to exploit that vulnerability. So what attacker does in the session fixation attack is, he will visit first a vulnerable website, okay, vulnerable for session fixation, which provides the session ID before login into the account, and the same session ID will also be continued after logging in as well. Okay, so session fixation vulnerability happens. Session fixation, right? So this happens because before authentication, okay, we call it as a pre-authentication, and after authentication, like post authentication, session ID will be same. Okay, so if in case if any website is having this vulnerability where it is assigning a session ID before authentication, and if it is not changing after the authentication, then session fixation attack is possible. So what attacker does over here is he goes to the website. Okay, he visits the website, and server is going to give a session ID. For an example, let's say the session ID is 12345, right? And he will take this session ID and he will put this session ID into the victim's browser, which is 12345. Now when the victim goes and log in by putting his credentials into, let's say, the same banking application, what happens? The same session ID will be converted as a authentication. Okay, the same session ID will be converted as a authenticated session ID, which the attacker already having it. So he can use this session ID to access his banking application. Right? Got it? So simple. There is a vulnerability in the application where it is giving a session ID before authentication, and the same session ID is also used after the authentication. you know so what attacker does, he will go and take first pre-authentication session ID. He will put it into the victim's browser. Whenever he logs in, it will convert that as an authentication cookie, which the attacker already having it. He uses this session ID, which is the authenticated cookie of the victim, to access all his banking application. I'll show you this example, you will understand it. So to show this demo, I am using two different browsers over here, right? One is Mozilla and one is Chrome browser. Okay. So, okay. So here, let's consider that the browser which I'm using, Mozilla, is a attacker's browser. Okay. As an attacker, in the browser one, I am visiting this vulnerable website. Sorry. I am visiting this vulnerable website. Sorry. Yep. Okay. Yeah. Right. So browser one, which is Mozilla, attacker's browser. So I'm visiting this browser. So where do we see the session IDs and cookies? If you go to the storage, here you will be able to see this, right? So to check whether this application is vulnerable for the session fixation or not, you can see that this is a session ID. We didn't log in it. This is what our session ID is now, which ends with FF9C. So after login, by giving a valid credentials, okay, which is admin and admin, it should change. Okay, you can see that the session ID, the session ID value is same, which means this application is vulnerable for session fixation. Okay, as an attacker, he identifies this vulnerability, and how he will be exploiting it. He will be exploiting in this way. Okay, so he will be visiting this application. So we got this session ID, right? We got this session ID, or let's take the new session ID to maybe uh, understand it well. Okay, it is not giving any anyway. Okay, so he knows that, okay, this is a session ID which it is uh, which we got it before authentication. Okay, I have already logged out. You can see it says sign in, and then he will put it into the victim's browser, right? He will put it into the victim's browser. You can see this guy has some other one. I am replacing it here, and I'm closing it. And whenever this guy, you know he's not aware of the cookie is injected into his browser, he'll be putting his own credentials to log in into this account. Done, he logged in, and he's accessing all his transactions and etc etc, all of the things, right? Okay, but This cookie is now converted as a authentication cookie. Right now, if I simply refresh this page, you can see this sign in will convert as a sign out, a sign off. You can see we already logged in into the administrator account. See the same bank statement and etc. We can also able to see without giving any credentials or logging into the application into the attacker's browser, right? It might feel something maybe confusing for some of you, because you guys are might be new to this topics, but just to make you understand how we are going to learn the things in a practical way, I am demonstrating this couple of demos over here. Hope you uh, got it. If someone has any questions from these two demos, you can let me know. These are the two demos which I wanted to show you, uh, from the application layer point of view. I mean web application layer attacks point of view. Okay, if you are good with it, okay, uh, I can show you some of the attacks related to the network and some of the attacks related to the system. Hmm?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, no worries. This is just a demo, as I said. Okay, this is just to make you understand how, in what way we are going to learn the further sessions, right? Okay, so I'll show you some of the other demos related to the network layer, right? I'll show you some of the attacks related to the network layer. So here I'm using the operating system as a Linux operating system, which is an attacker system. And let me use this Windows 7, which is my target system. Okay. So my Windows 7 is up and running. I think my Kali Linux is also getting started. So what I'll do now is, uh, I'll show you first a system, like how to exploit a vulnerability in the system, right? Let's say we have this Windows 7 operating system. As you know, this is EVOL operating system, which is end of life from the Microsoft. They are no longer is going to support this operating system. Like they are not going to give any sort of a patches to it. Correct? Let's say if someone is using this operating system still, okay, without knowing that it's a evil operating system, without knowing that there are certain vulnerabilities which are sitting in it, okay, which can be directly exploited by the attackers, when they are connected to the same network, right? So there are certain vulnerabilities, guys, in this Windows 7 operating system which can be remotely exploited. Okay, the process of identifying and exploiting those vulnerabilities will be covered in the actual course. But right now, I am directly jumping into the exploitation phase. Like I'll cover, okay, how do we find it, and how do we exploit it, but that'll be too quick. But every phase of the attack, starting from the information gathering, scanning, enumeration, vulnerability assessment, exploitation, post exploitation, will actually be covered in the course. But right now, just to as I said, to show you this demo, I'm doing all of these things, okay, step by step, in a quick manner. Okay, so there is one system in my network. Let's say we went to the public network. Uh, there are a lot of systems are connected, or we are connected to the victim's network. So as soon as the attacker connects to some network, right? First of all, what he'll be doing is he will be performing the scan. Okay, he'll be performing the scan with his system to identify how many systems are connected in that network, right? For that, that is called as a host discovery scan. So to perform that host discovery scan, I am using a tool called as a nmap, which is a very very famous uh, network mapper tool, which is open source tool for performing the port scan, uh, you know uh, host discovery scan, lot of things we can do it, right? So quickly, I'm using this nmap tool, and I'm running the scan on the same network where I have connected to identify how many systems are actually live and how many systems are responding to me, right? So I can see that there are three systems are up in my network. So one of the system is Windows 7. So how do I able to identify which is a Windows 7? That is running in the Oracle VirtualBox. You can see here it says that this is the IP which is running in the Oracle VirtualBox, and this is my local host. It is running with the Intel processor. So these all the details are something we are getting it by with their MAC address. MAC address is unique, so the first three octets of this MAC address indicates the vendor. So yeah, it's saying that it's a virtual. It's running in the virtual environment. Okay, so this is our target now. Even or else you can directly go to the Windows 7 and you can open the command prompt and type ifconfig. You will get to know your IP address. In my case, as an attacker, I am not interacting with the system. Okay, it's like I'm assuming that the target and attacker both are connected to the same network. Now attacker is performing some sort of attack, right? So we got this IP address, which is 192.168.249.29, and I am also doing a quick uh, I am also doing a quick scan on this network to see how many ports are open. Okay, so these ports are like entry points for an attacker. The more ports it is open, the more services it is running. The older version of the services which they are running, it is very likely to identify the vulnerabilities and break into it. So there are a lot of ports open. I think 14 different ports are open as of now, right? So it's a default scan what I've done with the nmap, and I am also doing the version detection scans to identify what version of these ports are running. Some of they are saying that HTTP is running, MSRPC is running, NetBIOS is running, and etc. Right. So as an attacker, he will identify what version of the service is also running, because that is important, right? The more information you gather about the target, more easier it is to perform the attack. So as a part of the information gathering before attacking on any system, he he do this information gathering with the tools like nmap. Okay, so he's doing the scan now. Like as I said yesterday, right? When we do the vulnerability assessment with the help of the scanners only. So this is one of the scanner which I'm using, scanning tool. Okay, so it's taking a time because it is identifying the versions of each and every open port. Okay, what it is doing, it is identifying the versions of each and every open port. So it's gonna take some time. So we have to wait, uh, to get the results. Once we have the results, let's say if you can able to identify maybe some of the versions of services, you can take those version details and look into the Google or vulnerability databases to see if there is any vulnerabilities are matching, and if we can able to exploit them, if the exploit is available public, right? So as this is a older operating system, as I said, there are some There is one critical vulnerability, uh, which is in SMB port, which is port number 445 in Windows 7. I'll show you that how do we exploit it. Okay, that is a remote code execution vulnerability, and the exploit is also out into the internet. So if you can simply Google it, right, Windows 7 vulnerabilities, you will get lot of vulnerabilities details with the CVE numbers into the vulnerability databases. Okay, so let's say Windows. I mean, if you know the specific version, and that will be very much useful. Uh, I could have run this scan only on that particular. Okay, we got the result. So you can see now we got the result. So we got something versions over here. It says bad blue HTTPD 7 is running. Windows 7 or Windows 10 is running, right? So when you know the operating system details, okay, uh, you can simply, okay, we know the Windows, we know the name also, name of the system. Okay, no problem. We can simply Google it. Okay, Windows 7 vulnerabilities, right? You will get lot of vulnerabilities from the CVE details. Okay, the CVE details is a vulnerability database. Anyone can access it, right? So there are a lot of vulnerabilities in it. So let's focus on something which can be exploitable, right? Or when you know the specific version of the Windows what they are running, it will be so easy. So let's see if in case if they are disclosing the version somewhere. So I'm using -p targeting only port number 445, and I'm running an aggressive scan. Okay. Uh, so what does the aggressive scan is going to do is it also performs the enumeration. It actually connects with that port, and it interacts with that port, and it checks. Okay. Uh, you know, yeah, it checks. It also runs the some of the scripts which are related to Nmap. So here you can see this is disclosing that Windows 7 Ultimate 7600, the operating system details, right? If someone knows or someone is exposing the operating system details like this, it is too easy for attackers to check what vulnerabilities are there, how this can be exploited. Okay, you can see the first result what we got is, okay, we got that the first result is uh, there is something called eternal blue remote code uh, Windows kernel pull corruption. Okay, right, yeah, this is the vulnerability which is a remote code execution vulnerability, and this works on Windows 64-bit architecture, and here is an exploit information, right? So we know that there is a vulnerability on this operating system, and that can be also exploitable. So the exploit code is also available with the exploitation tool called as a MSF console, Metasploit Framework Console. So now what I'll do, I'll use MSF console. Okay, I'll just use this MSF console, which is exploitation framework. We'll learn about it. So by using this exploitation framework, I'm going to load this particular exploit and give the target IP address and target port number, and then I'm going to exploit it, and I'm going to see whether the vulnerability can be actually exploited or not. Saying that okay, vulnerability is there is different. Going one step ahead and exploiting is what penetration testing is, right? I mean, till now, whatever we have done, like finding the vulnerability is one part, which is vulnerability assessment. Now, when it comes to going one step ahead and exploiting that vulnerability is the pen testing, right? So for that exploitation, we are using this tool called MSF, okay, Metasploit Framework Console, and I'm loading this exploit. You can see the exploit is automatically got loaded. and now give the R host, which is the target IP address, in this case 192.168.249.29, if I am not wrong. Yeah. And in which port we are targeting? We are targeting on the port number 445. This is open and it has some vulnerabilities, right? So we can directly give set R port, okay, set R port uh, 445, and you can give show options to verify whether the given details are added or not. Once it is done, you can just type exploit and see if okay, if you can able to get into the system and if the exploitation is working or not, right? So it says that the target is vulnerable, and yep, you can see we got one session open between my Linux operating system to Windows operating system. Okay, I got even something saying that win. You can see that I have a meta shell. Okay, this is to interact with the um, Windows 7 system. Okay, now if I type this info, right, it says that I am in Windows 7. You can see the Windows 7 is running as it is in the network. Just because there is a vulnerability which an attacker was able to identify and exploit it, he got an access to this Windows 7, right? Do you want me to delete this folder which is in the desktop of their system? I can do that, right? I can even take the shell. You can say I have the system32 shell. I can go back couple of directories back, and I can maybe check what directories are there. I can get into users. I can check what users are there. I can get into the user called Sai, and then desktop. I can see the files over there. There is something called a hacked, right? Even I can also create something over here, right? I can also delete something like delete hacked. Yes, done. Or I can create one directory over here, hacked. Okay, test, right? You can see there is test directory is created. Understand? Even you can able to see the test directory. Even I can do a lot of things here now because I was into the victim system. Okay, this has happened because uh, you know they are using a vulnerable operating system without you know having any sort of a security, and as an attacker he'll identify such type of a loopholes and he will try to break into the system, right? He can do a lot of things, guys. He can check how many webcams are there. Okay, sorry, how many webcams are there. Right now there is no webcams because it's a virtual system. Let me connect my local host webcam to it. Do I have the option to connect it somewhere? Oh, here only it would have shown that. Okay, it's not showing. Maybe in network audio. No. Okay, no problem. We can do a lot of things. Okay, we can check how many webcams are there. We can take the screenshot of the um, system. The screenshot got stored over here under the root directory. Um, what else? We can download something, upload something. We can run some sort of uh, commands into the target system. We can extract the saved passwords, let's say Wi-Fi passwords. A lot of things we can do it, right? So now complete system is under the control of an attacker. He can access all the sensitive information, which is like all the confidential information. He can modify anything, he can delete anything, right? So this is one example, guys. But yeah, uh, the process and the modules already added into the course content, right? So, yep. So I hope this is also clear to you. Okay, the system hacking which I've shown by exploiting a vulnerability. The process wise, it might be clear to you, but yeah, it is clear to you, but you might be having certain questions, and because it's new to you. But once you start with it, uh, yeah, these kind of real-time practicals will be covered in the sessions. Okay, so I'll stop here for today. I'll take your questions.